Yeah, so I got this. So these are kind of the current problems. This was a quote from someone that played the game. There's no story, no impetus to advance, no direction, no objective. This is another quote from someone that played the game. You know, they played it about a year ago. A year ago, though, however, the design would have been about 2 years ago because, you know, this was like we were sending out, like we were changing a lot of things about a year ago. And so the I was like redoing a lot of the tech, so I just kind of left the design there. So the design was still, you know, when they say a year ago, the design would have been like 2 years ago. It was just incredibly gorgeous, but not very mechanically interesting. The spaces were interesting, but nothing very interesting seemed to be happening in them, and the things that were happening in them didn't seem to be making especially powerful use of the spaces. So this is all valid. And so when we talk about this, so let me kind of get back to this second quote in a bit. With regards to the first quote, when people see this, they immediately say, "Oh, why not have a story? Why not have a narrator?" And that is not really the point. Having a narrator or a story would be the easiest thing to do, right? Because you know, if I say the man walked into the bar, he had on a black coat and it was drenched because it was raining outside, and he looked around the room and the entire bar went silent, and from his pocket he pulled out a small red box, and everyone in the room gasped. All of a sudden you're like, well, what's in the red box? You know, like I think it's just this human condition that when there's an unknown, like a mystery, we kind of want to know more about it. So to me, this is not so much that the you know, this is like not the root problem. Like all of this is not the root problem, right? It's that there's not, where is the kind of mystery that they're trying to get at? Like they're like, what am I trying to discover? There isn't that thing that's hooking them. So let me talk about the opening level. Yeah, and because part of this too is like a lot of games will just straight up tell you what you're doing, what you have to do, where to go. Right? I mean, if we're just thinking of all AAA games, is like you start the game and they just kill your wife or they kill your father, and now it's like, well, I guess I gotta get revenge, right? The Shadow of Mordor, Assassin's Creed, Watch Dogs. Watch Dogs was like your nephew died in a car accident and now you go on a murder rampage. It doesn't make any sense. But I think for a lot of players, it's like, that's enough. Oh, right, like, what's my purpose? Kill people. It's like, okay, I gotta get revenge. It's like, okay, well, you know, it's like, what's my purpose? To get revenge. What do I do now? Kill this guy. Where do I go? Well, I just follow this thing on the screen, right? And it's just like kind of like all AAA games is like, go here, kill him, like, and that's what it says. You're like, go here, get this, go here, like it's all, you know, and you're like, it's literally you're like, you know, 500 feet away, 500 units away, and they kind of, you're closer, and then they tell you, and then you have your mission objective. So Manifold Garden doesn't do any of that. So I can understand that so I have to work harder to convey the purpose. So, and I do think it's doable. I think it is doable without explicitly telling player in words through story what's going on. So let's talk about kind of like what needs to happen is there needs to be a sense of mystery, and there needs to be a kind of purpose. And I think The Witness does this, right? The Witness sort of does this with its lasers, and you see the mountain and you're like, I want to get into the mountain. So let's talk about this current world. So actually, you know what, let me play the level. Right, so I think, like, you know, in the beginning, what we're doing is the player is kind of going through this. And at the beginning, they're just kind of learning the mechanics. Oh, by the way, that looks great with the bloom. That bloom looks fantastic. They're just kind of learning the mechanics, right? But so what happens is once the player gets outside of this area, the first thing that they come across is this tree. Okay, so they do this tree. And okay, so now there's this like laser beam that they can light up. Okay, so while we're going through the beginning of the game, there are, like, what's happening at the beginning is sort of there are these, to talk about like the loop in the game has like the immediate loop, right? And the immediate loop is just sort of, okay, get outside this room. Kind of like you're faced with a puzzle and you just sort of want to get out. So you kind of get these, like, we're kind of graphing player interest. You know, they're sort of seeing a new mechanic. Okay, like at first it's button in a box, but we got to teach them that. And each here is like, you know, let me do this. This is like, right, get out of room. So that's your kind of small, like your kind of immediate goal, right? The sort of goal that wants to happen within the next 5 minutes to get out of the room. And then you get outside here, and that's a cool visual. And you light up the laser, and you know, this is sort of outside. So, and here players get a little overwhelming, and this is sort of intentional. Maybe it dips down because they don't know what to do, then they gotta try to figure out how the major area is presented, and then eventually they kind of figure it out. So they kind of get that you get kind of like another big boost here, and then what we get is a bunch of kind of smaller, you know, then they sort of solve the puzzle to get that, and like you find out there are these 4 lasers that you have to light up to open up the door to the next area. So, but the problem is, as they're like, okay, so the big goal is to like open the door in the tower, right? That's like this is the big objective. Oops. Like this is kind of the big thing that's like the arc, and then as you are playing around, you're just like, okay, let's get out of this room. Here I lit up one laser, get out of this room, I light up another laser, I get out of this room, I light up another, and you're working towards it. But the problem is, like, each subsequent laser you light up is like less interesting because you've already seen it before. Like, okay, the first one is cool because you do that for the first time. The second time, maybe that's also cool because you're like, oh, I see, now it's part of a pattern. But then the third and fourth, you're like, you kind of already know that it's a pattern, you know what you have to do, and so you're just kind of going through the motion, right? And then, so, and this is let's see here. I'm gonna call it game loop 001. So this is like kind of what the player is experiencing. within the level. Now what happens is, so we kind of, let me just do like a smaller version, right? You kind of get out, and you have your big loop, which is, so it's like your red is, let's say, get out of room. That's kind of the immediate goal. Green is get out of level. But what, so we have these two right now, but what player is missing is like the point of the game. Like they're like, okay, because what happens is they get to, you know, they go to another level and they're like, okay, we solve these rooms, and I've solved enough of them, I moved on to the next level. And you know, each time you repeat something, you get diminishing returns, right? So there's less interest on the player. So they're like, well, what's the point? You know, they get to the third one and they're like, they're not seeing this blue one yet. So then they're like, what am I doing here? So they leave. And I think that's what when they talk about not having an objective, like when they say there's no story, there's no purpose, there's no direction, this is really what they're talking about. It's the lack of blue arc. Because the green arc, I can do that, right? It's like, you know, you can signpost your way, that's just kind of straight up level design. So, but this thing here is missing. And I will talk about the big arc now. This is a little bit spoiler, but we're not going to change. So you can see here, this is the level, right? There are, you can see there's one laser beam from here that's lit up. There's another laser beam here, and there's like another laser beam here. So each of these is on an island with like a bunch of puzzles that you solve, and after you solve the puzzles, you get to light up the laser beam, and that all the laser beams turn on, and there's like a door here, and at the bottom of it, there's a door that you can open to go to the next area. Now, so what is the purpose of the game? What is the purpose? So there's a few things. This is what, and part of this was that part of why it's not communicated well is because originally this was designed as part of a kind of a bonus thing. Like it was, you wouldn't discover it until you like finished the game and you wanted to go through you wanted to further explore. But that essentially meant I was designing two games, and the better game was designed for the people that explored more. So it's like I was designing two games, and the better one was for the people that really kind of got to the end, which was like 5% of players. And making indie games is hard enough as it is, so I should just make one game and make that kind of the best one, right? So instead of doing these two games, so I'm kind of hinting at some mysterious things. Here's the dark tree, and here is this dark cube. So in the current iteration of the game, you kind of have to break the sequence of puzzles to solve it. I'm not gonna to unlock it. You have to find out where you can get these two cubes, which isn't very obvious. But I'm just gonna cheat and generate two cubes. But when you pick up the dark cube, okay, if you drop it, it resets. But basically, you can pick up the dark cube, sends you into Dark World, and it's where it rains. So, and you can't change gravity. So I really like this mechanic. And then, you know, what you do is you can come back here and collapse the world. While we're waiting, let me answer a few questions. I'll get to the door thing actually. And no, we're still working on design. So why does this take so long? So you can see basically you're left with this like alien plant life creature. And that looks really cool. So, and what can you do here? What can you do with this like weird god cube that's left? Well, there is an area that you can take the cube to. Oh god. So this kind of this like church-like area. Fuck. And here is sort of this central hub with a final door. Oh man. So yes, you do see the final door at the beginning. It is there. So this is what's going on, right? Like where there's like a final door that you can get to. I mean, right now it doesn't look super impressive. It just looks like the same door here, and it looks like any of the other doors. So that's what that looks like. Yeah, this level fucking loading in this area is just a mess. So yeah, this is the final door. As you can see, it doesn't look super impressive, but this is what players need to do. So when we talk about, let's go back and talk about the loops of the game. You know, we have our kind of immediate goals, short-term goals, is like get out of the room or like solve a specific puzzle, right? So this is a puzzle. Then we've got dealing it with the entire level, right? Like get out of level. And here we have solve puzzle. And then we have our big thing. That, my friend, is the train. No, I'm no longer subscribed to myself. What the fuck? I can't use my own emojis anymore. Oh no, wait, never mind. So yeah, back to what I was saying. We've got our immediate goal. So this is like solve a puzzle. Ah, fuck. Every time I click outside of the frame, it disappears. Solve a puzzle. Okay, let's go back here. That's solve a puzzle. Now for the green is right. That's like get out of it. And here, the next one, this big thing, right? I'm like, really, what you're doing is like open final door. And there's a few things here, like with each one you're getting, you know, the game is a contemplation about architecture and God, and it's what we're doing here is where, like, each time you're not actually solving an area. It's not about getting an area, right? The loop is really like enter dark world and bring forth the God, right? Like bring forth the divine plant. Right? That there's this and alongside this we are including, I think, like new movement mechanics, so increasing that. So the problem right now is that the dark world, the whole thing with the divine plan is not communicated very well. So like one thing that I'm doing is I'm actually getting rid of, I'm changing it such that the I'm changing it so that these two places, like only two of the laser beams help open up the final door, the door to the next area, and two of these actually unlock the dark puzzle. So now the kind of the loop involving the dark world is no longer like in a kind of like an aside that you, like a bonus thing that you discover, but instead it's actually part of the main course of the game. So I think that is something that will address this concern, right? Because really, I think what he's trying to say here is that it's like, what's my purpose? What am I trying to do? And I think that creates it, you know, and what so it's not delivered. There's not going to be any voiceover or anything explaining what these things are, but I like to think of it, you're sort of like this prophet. You know, like the prophet John, he was going around setting up the place, and then yeah, I mean, and then Jesus comes, right? And so this is you're trying to bring forth the divine plan, like you're coming in ahead, and whether they're celestial beings, whether they're good or evil, that's not really up for me to decide. Maybe they're just something like beyond what we can comprehend. So it's not about yeah. So I think there is a narrative. And then, you know, we kind of clear that up with the ending, but I think it's more like he's not saying there's no story. What he's trying to say is like, yeah, this is really the thing, right? There's no sense of mystery that implies that pushes us forward to advance with the game. And I think when you talked about the objective and the direction, I mean, direction, I think that's like signposting, making the game, making the level geometry clearer, and objective, right? Like, okay, if I know, I think right now is players are like, there isn't that long-term goal, right? They don't know they got to open up that final door. They don't know how to do that because you can't get that God Cube until you've brought forth the Divine Plant. So people are just like, well, what's like, I'm just kind of moving into a new area, but I'm not really sure what this is all working towards. Okay, so that's that problem, which I think I have a solution. I'm curious to hear what people's feedback on that is. Now the other thing here, and I think that kind of ties into the progression mechanics, right? As you're solving puzzles, like also right now is when you solve a puzzle, you just get like 2 cubes. You grow a tree, you get 2 cubes, one to open a door and one to like open up a new door. So I think progression mechanics, having that in here is can I actually see the link? Is like part of this is I think any of the mods, are there mods here? Garrett is a mod, Jet User is a mod. Yeah, I mean, I think Stugan is right. The game's been in development for a very long time. So not very interesting spaces. Right. So in terms of progression, I think part of that is showing players new. So there's a few things that I'm thinking of doing for progression. Yeah, we need loot boxes and multiplayer. That's the solution. Zophor, I'm going to assume you haven't made a game. No, because that is not what the game needs. Alright, so this is like the final door that's all leading up. We have the doors become sort of increasingly more complicated. So instead of all looking the same, they are all, you know, we can kind of start to see like variations of doors that you can light up. Right, kind of new mechanics that players are coming across. So there's like for mechanics, so for progression mechanics, I think like better visuals, sort of like increased aesthetics as player progresses, sort of like better feedback with each group of puzzle solved, because right now it's like you don't really get a right now you don't when you solve a puzzle well, no, I mean, is it new content? I mean, I can't I have design problems that I have to solve, right? These are all, I mean, they're all easier to solve because we're not adding new tech. I mean, everything that I'm trying to do is like in the game buried somewhere, but the design things are not resolved, and I can't the game isn't done until those are solved. But I mean, we have the tech, we're in a position where the tech is there, the assets are there. So I think better aesthetics as player progresses. So this is like new and interesting doors, different doors, like different types of buttons to press. etc. We have better feedback with every time like a puzzle is solved. So for example, let's jump to this last one. Sure, I think you're actually regular. Yeah, you can actually post links, so. So let's go down to, right, like here, when we're looking at the doors, you know, there's sort of more interesting feedback, right? Like when you solve a puzzle, you get, like, that lights up. Right, and again, same thing with the water. That should not be on. Oh. Oh, look at that, I think it's broken. Right, so it's kind of just like different types of buttons, so they're not doing all the same thing, like new mechanics. The other thing I'm thinking of is like new movement mechanics, like new increased freedom of movement. This is not sure, but I think like I'm gonna let player jump, like double jump or something, or like flying. It's kind of new stuff, like or like not teleport, but dash. Like dash through walls. Could be interesting. So more prominence, Dark World signposting, yeah. We're using our Euclidean geometry. Okay, so this is, I think, some of the progression problems. And I think that kind of ties into pacing. Also, things can get repetitive, so I think having new types of interactions, and I think this all kind of solves that. Now, let's talk about this one though, this issue, this problem. Last time I played it, so incredibly visually gorgeous, but not very mechanically interesting. And let me, so I'm not saying who this person is, but I just want to add, this is another, and this is feedback I've gotten from other people too. It's not, like part of the quote was also here. The version I played was about picking up and dropping boxes, which is, it's a sort of thing I might have seen in the game in 2010. It's not very engaging. So here is my now you wouldn't get those abilities until much later, right? Because early on I still need to constrain your mechanics. Later on you can start moving around, like that frees up movement. But and this is a problem that I have struggled with, which is like, it's just about, how do I tell people that the game is more than just picking up and dropping boxes? They do help at the beginning, but what is, like, what's interesting later? What is, and so, and I don't know how to make a game without killing people. Like, Okay. So if you have a game like Civ or those city builder games, to me those are all about kind of optimizing. They're kind of like these cookie clicker games. Every time you do something, like you kind of get something new to do, right? With if we look at like a city building game, it's like, okay, you start off just kind of building houses and factories, but then like once you get enough, you get to build like a stadium. You get to build you start with a town hall, but then okay, now you have enough people, you get to build a stadium, you get to build condominiums, you get to build like a subway system, and they kind of time that so you kind of have all these like loops that you're managing at the same time, and then you kind of get more and more, and you're kind of optimizing all of that. The which is not what my game is about. Like it's not about kind of optimizing or maximizing something. When I think about games where you have to think about architecture, that's like Dishonored. But Dishonored is about getting from point A to point. That's not just about getting from point A to point B, right? It's just about killing. Like it really is about. I mean, it's about navigating a space, but also in order to kill someone, right? So you've got that thing, which is cool because you're thinking like, okay, well, how can I use this space in such a way that they don't see me, but that I can sneak up on them, right? Like, where do I put this? Like, how can I use this space to my advantage to sneak up on someone, right? To get into some place without letting them know. But Manifold Garden doesn't have that like stealth and that danger tension. Okay, so how am I using space? You have The Witness, which is really about observation of the architecture, right? Like, okay, if I look at the architecture this way, I can solve a puzzle. Naissance is really about navigation, but like like what this is such a big question, and I just don't know how to tackle it. No, but I think right now what we're getting at is that root mechanic. Like what is the mechanic here is you're like picking up these boxes, you're bending water, but like how can we do it such that it's how can we be interacting with the space that's interesting. Right? Is it a navigation? Like, can you build, like I think the problem is if it's where I allow players to create architecture, that almost becomes a totally different game. That becomes like, like when you start going that, then it's just like Minecraft, right? Because then, you start doing more. Right, but okay, but like what you guys are talking about there is still thematic, right? That's the ugliness. Like we have variations of that. What I'm talking about is the actual interaction with it. Is it right? Do I allow players to like pick up entire geometry and move it around? Right? Is it mending or connecting? But like, what's the actual interaction besides picking up the box? Right? Portal's got you can shoot portals, which I think is great. So what is that? So, but machines are just kind of buttons, right? Like that's levers and pulleys. Like those in the end are just. How do I bring forth the plan? Well, you bring the dark cube to the dark tree, and that collapses the world. These are just quotes that people have given me, like we're talking about problems and sort of some solutions to do. So I do have that. I do have parts of the geometry changing based on your gravity, right? But it's like, but what is the core mechanic? It's just like, it's about boxes, right? I mean, people have the same thing to say about Witness. It's just about drawing lines. And it's just, I can't, like, what am I doing with... I know, like, see, to me, the thing with the box, Garrett, is like, the reason why the box exists is because it forces you to stay in one gravity. You can change gravity and go anywhere in the world, but once you're carrying a blue box, if you want to get a blue box across a gap, like, right, here's the problem, right? Let's say this is it. Now in games where you can't change gravity, player is here. And the problem, and you need to get to here, right? The player needs to get to here. Getting across this gap is the problem. So you figure out how to solve it, okay? Like maybe, I don't know, you cut down a tree, you put it down there, you like go get a power up, you get these new boots and they allow you to like jump farther. That is the problem. In Manifold Garden, getting across is not the problem until you are carrying a cube. Like if I have a blue box here and I need to carry that blue box across, then it becomes a problem. So it's that there are... You see what I'm saying? Like this, the cube becomes what makes it interesting. But at the same time, having the cube is like, it's just like, you know, everything revolves around the cube. I gotta pick up the cube and put it here. Yeah, I do have that, like, but isn't it, I'm just wondering if it's possible. Can I move away from the cube completely? Oh, you know what? Making it so that you can have repetitions is interesting. Well, it is. We are about motivations, but like we're talking about just sort of problems in general, right? These are just sort of like, these are the problems I'm facing. I mean, there is the, we are talking about progression mechanics. Like this is all just like design problems. That it's like, okay, the tech is almost done, right? We are at a stage. It's like, okay, here's like this portal looks weird, like that. This thing shouldn't be there, but like Arthur can fix that. That's not a problem. You know, like we got to get this laser showing. That's also like not a big deal. That's doable. Like we're all like, you see all the problems that we're facing are mostly they're kind of small technical visual bugs, and I think, but what's yeah, I don't think we're gonna remove gravity switching. That's kind of a big part of it. But I don't. Then it's just like, then it's just another platformer puzzle. Well, you know, but the thing is, the wool wrapping was implemented so that you can. Like, I don't want to have to do the checkpoint system, you know? That's like a different game. We do have things affected by gravity. Like water. Maybe it already has solved. Maybe I already have solved it. I mean, the water is like, I'm thinking like more focus on, you know, we have like water geometry, right? Like I think when you start doing stuff like this, it's less... or maybe like ability to create cubes, right? Like you know, we're getting like, look at the water, right? This is, it kind of falls back around, like it's not, you see it's already starting to be like, look at that. We're doing like really interesting things with water. Like this is all, the tech handles this shit. I mean, first of all, that is a bug. You know, I think we have like interesting systems, right? And like this becomes a bridge that you can walk on. So like what, you know, it's not as like what do they call it? Immersion as I think maybe like Minecraft, maybe. But I feel like we've got enough properties, or maybe like maybe between all this stuff it's fine. Maybe I do have enough. And maybe like the bug boxes is not necessarily a problem. I don't know, what do you guys think? You know, I feel like it's like I'm so close. You know, I've got all this stuff in the game. We've done the hardest part, which is just like getting the tech there, right? Like we've got the physics of it when you drop off. Like we got the water, we got all these things, and I'm just in what